Welcome everyone, welcome in the room and welcome online. We saw right now, everyone, it worked. Welcome to the event, Death by Sea and Sand, Human Rights Violations on the Road to the UK. This is part of event series organized by ICOP, as Risham introduced it. And like some of the events, this is the kickoff event, this is the first one. Some other events will be, for example, on the legal status of migrants, as well as on detention centers. The motivation, to start off a little philosophical, is that migration fundamentally is a normal part of human existence even, right? Since there are humans on Earth, there has been migration. This makes our time pretty weird because today migration is heavily regulated by states and there are border regimes, and much of migration is just straightforwardly illegalized. That means illegalization means exposing people on the move in general to hardship, torture, slavery, and death. Those who manage to arrive in the country of their goal country, those people are subjected to heavy regulation, which is ruining lives through constant anxiety, abuse at work, and sometimes forceful deportation. At the same time, and now we get closer to the current political conjuncture, migrants are blamed for many social ills of the UK and actually in all of Europe currently. Migrants are scapegoats. They are politically instrumentalized for authoritarian demagogy. So, with this, on this hopeful note, as ICOP, we organized this panel series to have a human-centered analysis with experts, which means researchers, NGOs, and of course, people with first-hand experience. And we hope to spark ideas for a different kind of politics so that we can, in a way, contribute that a change in government in the UK also means a change in politics, because it's not always given, right? So today we're talking on the migration route through the Sahara, the Mediterranean to the UK. We talk about the reasons for this route, the conditions that migrants are subjected to or exposed to, and also some ways forward. Good. Without further ado, again, welcome everyone, and I hand over to Giulia. Thanks a lot.
Should I come there and stay here?
Berenice, can you hear Giulia when she talks?
It could be better.
It could be better. Okay, thank you, Giulia. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Camera. Mm-hmm.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming in such a good number. My name is Giulia Casentini. I have been a research associate here at SOAS and then lecturer in social anthropology for a year. Now I'm transiting towards back to Italy, my country of origin, where I will be lecturing in social anthropology back there. I have an experience in research, especially South-South migration trajectories in the African continent. But I've been doing some years of research also on those mainly Africans, but not only, moving towards Northern Africa and then transited through the Mediterranean to arrive to Italy. So I will present today some data coming from that research and some reflection on it, and hopefully carrying you from Africa to the Mediterranean through Europe and then to the UK, where Mirhea will continue the story. We are very lucky to have Berenice with us today, who will give us a lot of insights, first-hand insights from Sea-Watch perspective. So I will open the discussion on structural conditions that lead people to take the perilous route towards Europe. and on the feasibility of the current EU responses to the arrival of people on the move. And I will try to produce some reflection also on policing solutions. I don't know the level of knowledge of the audience about the routes and the migrant choices, so I will just give a bit of information on that. If you want then to discuss them further, just make question afterwards. I'm more than happy to dig deeper if I know and if I can. So I will focus on the Mediterranean, and I will use Italy and the Central Mediterranean route as a case study that I think is quite informative also on the attempt at legislating against the free movement of people, on strengthening the border and producing externalization policies. That can be useful also to dialogue with the UK choices, UK perspectives, and the feasibility or not of this kind of possibilities. So let's see what will come out of the joint discussion at the end. So currently the flows of people arriving in the EU pass through 3 different routes involving the crossing of the Mediterranean Sea, that is the central, the eastern and the western, and the western route that passed through the Canary Island. So these, I refer to the data produced by Frontex and also used by UNHCR recently, so in this month of October, sorry. They portray the numbers on the move from January to September 2024, so pretty updated. So through Canary Island, we have roughly 30,000 people transiting, while a lesser number reached Spain through the western route. Western route is, imagine, like Morocco, then Ceuta Melilla, or crossing Gibraltar and arriving to Spain, roughly 12,000 people. The Central Mediterranean route sees still the vast majority of people trying to leave Libya, Tunisia, but also Algeria and Egypt, registering so far almost 55,000 arrivals. And the Eastern route is dramatically increasing in the last years due to the protocol of understanding in between European countries, European Union and Turkey. And see the arrivals in Greece through Turkey, Syria, Afghanistan and Egypt of 45,000 people, who then often from Greece proceed towards the Balkan route to continue their journey to Europe. Another deadly, very difficult route with a lot of pushbacks, violence of the police on transit, and attempt at detain people, even if the conditions are not those of detentions. The main final destination countries are, apart from Italy, Spain, and Greece, that are the first country of arrival on these roads, are where in these countries where people are often forced to register and present their asylum claim, even if asked, they would like very much to present the asylum claim somewhere else, because they may have families, connections, interest to move mainly to France, Germany, and the UK, sometimes Sweden, but very often not in Italy, Greece, and Spain. But yeah, Dublin III regulations as you may know, force people to present a claim for asylum in the first country of arrival, and this complicates a lot their freedom of choice and their possibility also to join networks that are already established, instead of sitting in a reception center for months or years without any kind of possibility for future. So why people choose a certain route? This is a complex point. I would like just to throw some ideas about that. Also, why do people leave the countries of origin? And these are a very big discourse. I'm not going to confront completely, but very often they face conflict situation. That is the case of people moving from Ukraine, Syria, Mali, Sudan, among the others now. The number of people moving from Syria following Frontex data are 28,000 people only from January to September this year. So push factor can arise on many other reasons, from the amelioration of their economic conditions, or gender-based violence, or the persecution of LGBTIQ plus people in the country of origin, and also the adverse effects of climate change, which is interesting now, many places. A very important example is that of Bangladeshi people who are moving in large number, considering the small size of the country. We see that 9,500 people only in 2024 left Bangladesh. They used the central Mediterranean route to arrive to Europe. You may ask yourself why this is happening. This happened because they take a flight and regularly join Libya, arriving Libya or another MENA country with a maybe short-term visa, work visa. And then from there, they organize the route towards Europe. So you see, there is a mixture of regular and irregular movements. You are never always irregular, not always regular. This doesn't, of course, not something that depends on you, on your choices, but it's something that depends on your passport and on the visa regimes and the highly racialized borders that we are seeing today erected in the European Union. So they reach Italy, they arrive in Italy normally, where they have a big community. I'm still talking about Bangladeshi people. The network they establish in Italy is very big, and it's a network that reflects in the UK. Their ultimate dream is to reach their friends and families in the UK. They may not make it after Brexit, but they still have built up a very big community in Italy, passing through this very complex road. So this is a case in which regular and irregular movement intertwine, and this is why we use the definition of mixed migration trajectories when we talk about the Mediterranean. So in this context of rigid visa regimes and racialized borders in which there is a disproportionate lack of access to regular routes, that is the point. The presence of an established network of intermediaries and facilitators is fundamental. Migrants, the people I've been talking with and the people I've been working with in the last 10 years, have a radically different perspective on intermediaries than those of the states, especially the European states, that tend to criminalize their activities, often assimilating them to traffickers, or to narrow down the focus on their complex role by using the term smugglers as a catch-all category, obscuring the full range of intermediaries and the agency of migrant in choosing the intermediary, paying him or her to reach from point A to point B due to the lack of power of the passport that the migrant is holding in his hand. As a person from Sudan that gave me an interview in late 2019 in Ventimiglia, that is a small town at the border between Italy and France. He was trying to reach them and to leave Italy, but he couldn't for many years. Talking about his trip, he told me, I traveled by land with a car. It took 4 days to arrive from Sudan to Egypt and other 4 days to enter Libya. The smugglers who helped me to arrive in Egypt are in collaboration with the ones who arranged the trip to Libya. They are Sudanese, Egyptian, and Libyan men. They all work in a coordinated manner. Everyone covered their own national territory, and they organized a trip for all the Sudanese on the run. EU and member states have, in the years, proposed an approach that promotes the strengthening of border control. Through the creation of Frontex, first of all, and through the collaboration with other non-EU states, with a strategy called the externalization of borders. They've used mainly Libya through bilateral agreements in between the Italian state and Libya in this case. Also, Turkey has been widely used Rwanda was a proposal, is still a proposal from the UK government under evaluation, and Albania is used by Italy as well. So this is highly problematic in terms of the respect of human rights of people on the move, but it still seems to be the only true, real political efforts, not only as a political decision, but also as an economic investment, because we're talking about really a lot of money invested in enforcing the Libyan Coast Guard, for example, training them to help physically Italy to perform pushbacks to a country that cannot be really considered a safe third country. This is why Italy has been fined, has been condemned by the European Union for this choice, but still, the memorandum of understanding was signed first time in 2017 by a left-wing government. And I'm interested also in knowing what you think about this change of government in the UK, and if there's some change that you foresee or not. And it has been automatically renewed in 2022 for other 5 years, no matter which government is. Now, in 2023, we had this idea of the right-wing government, Italian government, to open to Albania the possibility of transporting people on the move there instead of the Italian authority, using Albania as a frontier where people can be placed waiting for the consideration of their necessity to ask for asylum. This has been a few days ago denied as a possibility by the Tribunal of Rome. So these 12 people that ended up in Albania were brought back to Italy. This has, of course, brought back another adding difficulties to an already perilous journey, adding uncertainty, fear, whatever can bring this multiple change of country, but also a huge waste of money. So this is very problematic, but it's still the main choice by several countries and the European Union as such, that like the civilization of border. So the activities of Libyan authorities decided in collaboration with the Italian government are actually right now working in collaboration with trafficking networks. I would like to point the attention towards the fact that trafficking and smuggling are two different activities under, also the criminal point of view, the judicial point of view, even if sometimes the border in between the two is blurred, but they're very different activities. Smuggling contemplate the agency of the migrant. You pay someone to produce fake documents to help you crossing the border that you can't cross, but you ask this person to do so. And very often they are perceived as helpers, necessary people that help you doing something that you can't do due to the racialization of the border regime. While traffickers do transport people from one country to another with normally the purpose of exploitation without the consent of these people. In Libya, these two words, smuggling and trafficking, intertwined sometimes. And even if you start your journey with smugglers, so deciding autonomously to start it, say from Ghana, Burkina Faso, Niger, you start traveling, at a certain point, you may be intercepted by traffickers. And that your story completely change and you start being under the control of trafficking networks and probably spend many years, months or years in Libya because a ransom, the traffickers ask a ransom to your family to be allowed to continue a journey. But of course, sometimes your family cannot provide this money, so you're stuck there. You may be a victim of torture, victim of rape, and horrendous violations that happens actually in detention camp that are built under the name of reception centers with the money of the European Union and the Italian government. Because when pushbacks happens, migrants are brought to these centers where they should be, their request for asylum should be evaluated. But what happens there is under judgment of many independent organizations like Amnesty International, UNHCR, and the United Nations as well. But Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch also has produced dramatic reports on what is going on there. I don't think I have much time yet. So I want just to point attention on the fact that the Mediterranean, and trafficking networks, what do? They do exploit also the presence of migrants, also smugglers do exploit the presence of migrants to cross the Mediterranean. One Ghanaian man told me in Rome, in a reception center, is talking about the crossing of the Mediterranean he had to do. Libyans were managing the boats, but one of us, a migrant, was in charge of navigating the boats. They gave him a GPS and they let us go. Then I want to hear Berenice and what's the most complicated things on the issue of the rescue at sea and what NGOs are doing and what the criminalization of the NGOs means for people on the move. So the Mediterranean has been and still is a deadly route. Last but not least, it's dangerous to embark in an overcrowded boats, often in poor conditions, and try to cross the sea. The number of people reported dead or missing is increasing in the last years. UNHCR reports that in 2023, there were 4,110 people. Well, in 2002, there were roughly 3,000. These are, of course, estimates. We don't know how many missing people in the Mediterranean we have. But also arrivals are dramatically increasing. If people on the move through the Mediterranean Sea were 160,000 in 2022, the number raises to 270,000 in 2003. It's dramatic. So are the policies put in place by the EU and EU member states effective? It is important to note that not only the policies currently in use are not stopping or reducing migration flows, nor are increasing safety of people on the move, but also that increased securitized borders policing leads to more rather than less use of intermediaries. More difficulties I have to cross, more people I will need to help me, either good smugglers or bad traffickers. Then will be very difficult to choose, to be able to choose. So one person, a man from Sudan, from Mali, sorry, who I met in Ventimiglia, told me that in his opinion, the main vulnerability for migrants is a difficulty in crossing the border, especially the reaction of, in his case, the French police, but in general of the institutions that needs to keep the border safe as a primary goal. So I will lead the floor to Berenice, and I'll go back to my place. Thank you very much for listening.
Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you so much, Giulia, for this very nice, for this first presentation, which is actually nicely completing what I'm going to present. So hello, everyone. My name is Berenice. I work for Sea-Watch, and I'm responsible for strategic litigation and our airborne operations. So I'm in the advocacy department. And that's why in my presentation, I will rather take the perspective, so what we see, what we witness from our aircraft. So Sea-Watch is, can you change slide, please? Thank you. So today we'll speak about, so first, what is Sea-Watch? What do we do? Some challenges that we have from the operational side and the policy side, so rather, so criminalization, namely. I will briefly mention the role of the UK and the UK companies in the Central Mediterranean, and yeah, then close with some last points. Next slide, please. Thank you. So Sea-Watch is a German organization. We exist since 2015. We operate with 4 assets at sea. So the big ships, the Sea-Watch 5, the fast rescue asset Aurora that only operates from Lampedusa. And we also have 2 aircraft because ships are slow. And we noticed over the years that actually there were much more happening than what we were only witnessing with our ships. And that's why we, together with our partner Humanitarian Pilots Initiative, we operate 2 aircraft, the Seabird 1 and the Seabird 2, with which we monitor the Central Mediterranean Sea and document what is happening, of course. Next slide, please. So where do we operate? This is the Central Mediterranean Sea. We basically monitor with our aircraft and with our ships. We focus on the departures from Libya and from Tunisia. We operate in the Libyan search rescue zone, where the Joint Rescue Coordination Center, the Libyan Joint Rescue Coordination Center, is responsible for coordinating rescue operations according to international law. The Maltese search rescue zone, the Tunisian search rescue, there is also the Tunisian search rescue zone, and the Italian search rescue zone. This is basically our area, and the departures that we see are in Tunisia and Libya, so from Tripoli, but also there are some from Benghazi, so the eastern side of Libya. Next slide, please. So to show as an example, so these are all the boats that we sighted from April to June 2024 with our aircraft. So all the boats in distress and all the empty boats that we sighted, and the dead bodies that we also sighted. So there is when we operate at sea, so we operate under the framework of international law, international search rescue law. So there is a duty to render assistance to persons in distress. And there is, in this duty, there is also the duty to rescue the person and then to disembark them in a place of safety. And as was said before, Tunisia and Libya are not a place of safety according to international law. And this means that Italy and Malta are place of safeties for the boats in distress in this area. Next slide, please. So we are coming to the operational challenges. So so some actors and behaviors that we see, witness, and mainly, as I said, I have here the aircraft perspective. So first, speaking about Libya, and in the Libyan search rescue zone and also in the Maltese search rescue zone, we have some Libyan militias active, mostly the so-called Coast Guard that are, as was said, equipped and trained by the European Union, by the European member states. They cooperate with smugglers. They're also involved in human trafficking. They use violence at sea, as you can see on the two pictures that I show here. And on the upper right side, it's the Tarek Ben Zayed brigade that is operational rather in the east, and that is also known for committing crimes against humanity in Libya. But you also have other, the coastal security, the Libyan stability support authority. So you have kind of a lot of Libyan actors operating at sea. There's also the Tunisian Navy, mainly operating in the Tunisian territorial waters in the Tunisian search rescue zone, that is also equipped and trained by the European Union and yeah, also equipped by single European member states. And the aim here is really, as was said before, so the aim is here for the European Union and European member states to ensure that no one cross the Mediterranean Sea. And that's why these actors are heavily supported by the European Union and European member states. Next slide, please. And this leads to Italy and Malta, which have deserted the Mediterranean. So to be honest, I've been working for Sea-Watch since for over 5 years now, and I have really seen both of them completely withdrawing from the Mediterranean Sea to actually let the actors that I have mentioned before be more and more present. And as I was saying, even the Stockholm Coast Guard are intercepting people in the Maltese at-risk zone and then bringing them back to Libya. And this leads to behaviors like the pictures that is here. That is an Inmarsat message. It's basically an alert sent to ships operational in a certain area. And this alert was sent by the Italian authorities on behalf of the Libyan, so on behalf of the Stockholm Coast Guard, with then all the contacts of the Stockholm Coast Guard. What we see is really an outsourcing of the responsibilities, so of their duty to render assistance to the Stockholm Coast Guard, to the Tunisian Navy, and to ensure that there are interceptions and pullbacks to Libya and Tunisia, although both are not place of safeties. And the second behavior that is also linked to this outsourcing of responsibilities and ensuring that no one crosses the Mediterranean Sea is the next slide, please. Is the fact that both Italy and Malta are shifting responsibilities, and especially as soon as the person, in the Libyan search rescue zone, but in the Maltese search and rescue zone, we see that both of them are just, on the one hand, so also seeing their responsibility to the Stockholm Coast Guard. And then when persons are in the Maltese search rescue zone, you have Malta referring to the Italian authorities and Italy referring to the Maltese authorities. And this leads to non-assistance cases, to delays during the assistance. One example is this case. We cited the people on the 2nd of September, and 2 days later, the same boat was actually sinking off Lampedusa. And we believe that around 21% are basically missing because of that behavior. And on the authorities, the Italian and Maltese authorities knew since the beginning about the boat that we cited on the 2nd of September, but still didn't do anything. Next slide, please. So I'm coming now to more the rather criminalization part. So there is this outsourcing of responsibilities, the later, and then the shift of responsibilities between Italy and Malta. But then there is also the criminalization of boat drivers. Each time there's a boat coming to Italy, then the boat driver will be, so the authorities will look for the boat driver that will then be arrested for facilitating illegal migration. For instance, if there is a shipwreck, then the person will be accused of homicide. There are apparently some reports about piracy so people or boat drivers are facing charges for piracy as well. And this is basically systematic, and this is a criminalization that boat drivers are systematically facing upon arrival. And the second thing is the criminalization of NGOs' work, so ensuring that we are not operational and by all means. This is by, how does it work? Misusing laws that hinders our assets from operating, or enacting laws like the one that is I have put here, that is the one that is now in force since the 11th of October, that is only focusing on our aircraft and requiring us to comply with some conditions that are actually already in the law, or our aircraft will be detained. And we know, based on the experience that the ships have, because this is actually already in place for the ships since since 2 years ago, no, since beginning of last year. And we know because of this experience of the ships that this will be misused and leads to detention of our aircraft. Next slide, please. And there's also the fact that how does it work also to hinder NGOs from operating is to assign far ports to disembark persons in distress. You have here on this screenshot all the ports that were assigned to NGOs since the current Italian government. Basically, it takes us days to arrive to the ports, and then it takes us days to come back to the Central Mediterranean Sea. And this is also challenging. So this just put also rescued persons even more at risk. We have also NGO activists have been facing criminal chargings for aiding and abetting illegal migration. And there's now also the practice of police interrogations upon disembarkation of crew members. Yeah, with the only aim to also, so psychologically, there's also an intention to just affect activists and crew members. Next slide, please. Now coming to the role of the UK and UK companies in the situation in the Central Mediterranean Sea. I would only mention 2 points. The first one is what happened to us with the Aurora. So the Aurora, our ship was flying the UK flag, and we were, after our first rescue operation, we were actually banned from, so we received a notice and were not allowed anymore to operate. And because of our registration, and also the UK authorities were requiring us to have a formal agreement with the Italian Coast Guard to have basically the authorization to operate, which was actually in no way legally required. And in the end, it led us to switch our flag from the UK one to the German one, to ensure that the Aurora could sail again and rescue persons in distress again. Next slide, please. And the second one is something that is still ongoing. This is the role of one private company, that is DEA Airlines. So this is a company that is providing aircraft services, so aircraft and personnel to anyone who wants it. And the Frontex, the European Coast Guard Agency, has a contract with them. And with this, so this means that you have basically aircraft of this UK company under contract, monitoring the Central Mediterranean Sea, and so conducting border surveillance activities on behalf of Frontex in the Central Mediterranean Sea. Next slide, please. But what actually Frontex truly does, and so with the support of DEA Airlines, is to, again, coordinate and ensure that there are interceptions and pullbacks to Libya. And so we have many cases in which we were in the vicinity with a ship, and once we go and we went on scene, so we see on open sources that the aircraft is orbiting somewhere. We go on scene with the ship and the aircraft, and this is already too late. People have been intercepted and then brought back to Libya. And this is really a current practice, and with the support of this UK company. Next slide, please. So I will end with what do we need actually? We need to shift the narratives. We need to search and rescue is a humanitarian duty, and it has become now linked to security narratives and law enforcement, and going actually away from this humanitarian duty. And when people are rescued, they have to be disembarked in a place of safety. We need states to actually actively engage in such rescue operation and to just abide by the law. That is to, there is a duty to render assistance. Persons may be rescued and disembarked in a place of safety. And Libya and Tunisia are no place of safety, according to the law. That would be all. Thank you very much.
Yes, please. Thank you, Berenice.
Thank you very much to you both for organizing today, and thank you all for coming. My name is Michne Kuibus. I'm a researcher with the Migration Observatory in Oxford. We are a non-partisan think tank based at the university in Oxford. We focus on UK immigration issues. So I'll be trying to provide a bit of perspective on what's been going on the UK end of this migration route, and Philip on some of the excellent detail that Giulia and Berenice provided. So just this morning, we've got news reports of 3 more people dying in the Channel as the boat they were using to cross to the UK sank. Another 45 people had to be rescued by the authorities. And we've seen that ever since 2014. Almost 300 people have died in the Channel since 2014, which, even though the numbers are much smaller than the one Berenice mentioned in the Mediterranean, it really highlights the enormous human toll that the small boats phenomenon is having, and the urgent need to address both its causes and its consequences. Now, in the next 10 minutes or so, I'll try to keep it brief. I'll aim to do 3 things. First, provide an overview of the situation in the UK. Second, discuss some of the reasons for the rapid expansion of the route that we've seen since 2018. And finally, just go through some of the solutions that have been put forward to address the crisis. To start, so far this year, we've seen around 27,000 people arrive in the UK after crossing the English Channel. This is very similar to the figures we were seeing last year at this time. It was around 26,000 last year, and significantly below the figures for 2022, which was the peak year for arrivals over the Channel. Now, since numbers started being provided back in 2018, more than 142,000 people have arrived in the UK after crossing the Channel. And as we're seeing, the numbers still remain very, very high. This is a large-scale phenomenon, and it doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. In terms of the people who are arriving here, in terms of nationalities, so if you look at the top 5 nationalities of arrival, Iran, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and Albania, these make up around 2/3 of all arrivals. So we're seeing consistent arrivals from some nationalities. However, the patterns have somewhat changed over time. For example, in the first half of this year, Vietnam was actually the top nationality for small boats arrivals. And of course, back in 2022, we saw this very large and still somewhat unexplained spike in arrivals from Albania. So things are moving to some extent. Once arriving in the UK, the vast majority of people who arrive by small boat, they apply for asylum. More than 94% of them eventually apply for asylum. Over half of these, so around Around 60,000 people are still waiting for a decision on their asylum application. We've seen that across the board with huge delays in the UK's asylum system and an enormous backlog that's been piling up. However, of those who have received an initial decision on their application, so the overall grant rate is relatively high and very similar to the overall situation for asylum applications. Around 3/3 of people are granted protection in the UK and recognized as refugees. There's also another issue here with withdrawn applications. So we're seeing a lot of these asylum applications being withdrawn, which happens for a variety of different reasons. Happy to go into it during questions. And this is a big problem for the government as well as for migrants themselves, who end up often remaining in the UK without any legal right to live or work here. So this is the broad picture of the situation. Now, arguably, one of the most important questions is why? Why have we seen this expansion? What's been going on since 2018? Because unlike in the Mediterranean, when we're seeing big numbers crossing for a while, this is a relatively new phenomenon still. And I think it's important to look at it from two sides. On one side, you have the structure, more supply-oriented conditions, and here we've seen the route evolve in two steps, in a sense. So at first, most organizations, so there's been a variety of reports from the Independent Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration. We've seen a number of studies by think tanks and international organizations, and they seem to agree that at first, the small boats route was simply a consequence of enforcement elsewhere. So ever since 2014, British and French authorities invested large amounts of resources into securitizing the border in northern France, installing more CCTV, increasing patrols, the number of guards, installing more motion sensors. So really trying to crack down and prevent stowaways on lorries and trains, which used to be the main entryway to arrive in the UK without authorizations. That's completely shifted, and we've seen as these routes became harder to get through, we've seen small boats show up as an alternative. And then in a later stage, we really saw the gangs that are operating this route increase in size and become more and more professionalized and capitalize on this early experience and provide the scale that's arrived at right now. On the other hand of the why, we have the perspective of migrants, and as Giulia, I'm not going to go into the reasons that people leave their countries. That's relatively well understood, but a lot of people are asking the question, okay, why are so many people making this very dangerous journey over the channel? They're paying large sums of money to be able to cross, and they're doing so after coming from France, which is already a relatively safe place, and after oftentimes crossing through a number of European countries on the way. There's no easy answer to this question, unfortunately, and different people tend to have different reasons for making this journey. What we do know is, based on interviews with migrants in northern France and based on the experience of refugees worldwide, and it seems that for some of these migrants, the UK was always the intended final destination, whether they were attracted here by the presence of family ties or ethnic ties, or just this general assumption and impression that still seems to be prevalent among many, that the UK is still a relatively welcoming place for migrants and refugees, where they do have more opportunities that they would have elsewhere. However, for other people, it seems that the UK wasn't the intended initial destination and just ended up, by virtue of geography, being kind of their last chance at the kind of safety and life they made the journey for in the first place. And here we're seeing a variety of reasons. We're seeing some people who had very negative experiences throughout Europe and suffered negative experiences there, and still see the UK as the kind of the last chance of that safety they were seeking in the first place. We're seeing a certain amount of people who had asylum applications in Europe that were refused, and then the UK is thereby seen as their last chance to be granted protection. And yes, just generally, we're seeing a broad variety of reasons bringing people over to the UK. And that leads me to the final big question here, which is what can be done about it? Because there's widespread agreement among government, civil society, and across society that this is a significant issue, that it needs to be addressed, and that the number of people making this very dangerous crossing should be reduced. But there's no agreement on how to actually tackle it. There's two broad approaches that governments have taken, and it's interesting because we're really seeing a shift in focus here in the UK from one to the other now after the election. So on one hand, you have the idea of deterrence, so that you can implement measures restricting the rights of asylum seekers and try to essentially convince them, influence their decision, and convince them to not make the journey in the first place. And that's been, of course, the focus of the previous conservative government. We saw a number of measures trying to restrict asylum seekers' rights. So we saw the Illegal Migration Act back in 2023, which was supposed to prevent people who arrived without authorization from seeking asylum in the UK. And then we saw, of course, the very controversial Rwanda scheme aiming to deport asylum seekers, including some who arrived on small boats, to the East African country so that they could have their asylum claims processed there and eventually potentially be granted protection. Now, Rwanda scheme obviously was never implemented. So Labour canceled the scheme on their second day in office. Not a single migrant has been forcibly removed to Rwanda under the scheme. So at the end of the day, it's always going to be impossible to tell if it would have worked. And there's no way to tell whether or not it would have influenced people's decisions and the overall numbers. What we do know, however, is that the general evidence on deterrence policies is at best mixed. So in general, the literature on refugees sees policy decisions as a relatively small factor influencing people's trajectories. We see limited information among migrants, and they're already taking these very large risks to their own life. So in order to influence those incentives, you'd have to have relatively big changes there. So big question marks about the effect of deterrence. On the other hand, you have the idea of enforcement. Berenice and Giulia talked, of course, about the most aggressive form of enforcement, just physically preventing people from arriving. We're seeing, of course, pushbacks in the Mediterranean. We saw them a couple of decades ago in the Pacific, in the case of Australia. This is not an option under consideration in the channel. Of course, it's very controversial from a human rights perspective. There might be some evidence for its effectiveness, but both the UK and the French authorities decided that pushbacks are too dangerous and pose too great a risk to life to be implemented in the channel. So the focus has been on really preventing journeys from taking place in the first place, and this general idea that Labour's focused on very much. Keir Starmer's promise during the campaign to smash the gangs. So they've set up this border security command based on the idea that by improving cooperation with forces across the continent and giving them additional resources, including some counter-terror style powers, can really go after these gangs and try to restrict supply. The thing is, it's likely that these measures will lead to more prosecutions, that more smugglers will be brought to justice as a result of these policies. What we know much less about is whether it will have an effect on overall numbers. So we know that the overall business model of these gangs is very decentralized. It doesn't take many resources to set up these kinds of operations, and oftentimes top leaders operate from outside Europe, so outside the jurisdiction. So it's still very early to say whether or not these measures will work. And there's also this interesting unintended consequence. And there's a possibility that by really increasing enforcement, by making it harder to cross from those beaches and those places that are accessible, there's a risk and some anecdotal evidence that this is making journeys more dangerous and really has contributed to the increased number of deaths we're seeing as both depart from further away down the coast or even inland. And there's, of course, other alternatives that have received much less attention from governments. I'm happy to discuss this in the Q&A. We're seeing civil society organizations have argued much more for safe and legal routes, so giving people a legal alternative to get to the UK. However, the political environment is difficult for such measures, and their effectiveness does seem to depend on scale. So if we look at the resettlement schemes in the UK for Afghanistan, they've been very small, and we're seeing indeed that Afghans are some of the top nationalities crossing the channel. And finally, there's the potential option, as we're seeing in the Mediterranean, of a deal across the channel, a deal with the EU or with France more specifically. However, it's very unclear, even though on both sides of the channel there seems to be appetite for some kind of agreement. It's very hard to see exactly how one would be negotiating, exactly what the UK could offer the EU in exchange for a deal that allows them to return migrants to France. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you very much. It's interesting that pushbacks are even considered as a method as they are like human rights violations, right? Anyway, so let's go straight to the Q&A. Yeah, should we do that? So we have 15-ish, 20 minutes, like however tolerant you are as an audience. Maybe we should take 2 rounds of questions. Good. I think at this point, for the online audience, I think I leave it with a cliffhanger because of our technical complications, and so I think we just keep the discussion in the room to make it easy for you to respond directly to the crowd. Good. Giulia, do you want to start? Just, I think it's fine.
I don't know if I can answer it. It's a very, very new thing. The first